Good afternoon, and welcome to another ironic introduction to another video. And today, I'm here to talk about something I think is a little disappointing, and maybe it's just poor planning or an oversight, but I actually think it's supposed to be a head fake that most players won't notice, because when you look at these drop tables, no one wants to do the math, no one does the math, but I looked at these and my gut instinct was like, man, this seems really shady, right? When you move percentages around this much, it feels misleading. So I went ahead and I did the numbers. It was much easier than I thought, and it is as shady as I thought it would be. And a lot of these are basic, and there is an increased value. I'm not like trying to say there's not, and like at base you have these awakening gems, which is what's skewing these numbers. I just think it could have been more transparent. They could have kept the percentage drop rates a lot more reasonable and subtracted elsewhere. It didn't need to be this. I didn't need to have to go make an entire Excel sheet and a spreadsheet crunching the numbers really quick to determine whether or not there is something kind of like Kabam's allowed to do it. They're allowed to give you less crystals with the chance of an awakening gem. There is a trade-off there, but that trade-off isn't presented. It's not clear and present, and in my opinion, I think that's just shady. That's the best I can describe it. So let me go ahead and describe to you why I think this is shady. So some of the drop rates, like I didn't do this one, the tier 4 basic catalyst fragments one, because while those are nice, I didn't feel the need, but some of these net neutralize out very simply. So you have this one here, the tier 4 basic catalyst, 1800 at 10%. And when you go across, you go, oh, you have a drop rate of just a full catalyst over here, which sounds really nice on paper, except that when you normalize the drop rate value here, this comes out to 36,000 tier 4 basic catalyst fragments. And this one, it has a half drop rate. So essentially, you will receive this drop twice as often, which comes out to a whole catalyst anyways. So there's really no difference between these two drops, except that they're taking up increased amounts of drop rate over here to kind of like accommodate the awakening gem. Seems fair so far. Totally respect that. It's just shinier. It looks better on the unstable. Tier 4 class catalyst fragments, same thing, right? If you normalize this, you would receive this one half as often, so you would receive 1800 if you doubled the drop rate. And you see here, normalized drop values. These two neutralize out. The tier 4 class catalyst fragments, 1800 compared to a whole one. Again, this one neutralizes out. And it's really frustrating. Like, it depends on how much harder unstable is, but if unstable is hard enough that people are failing in an attempt to get an awakening gem, it doesn't make sense that you have a good chunk of your drop rate equal neutral, right? So where like you're taking a better starting reward, a worse starting reward comparison, and then you could get the same drop rate reward over time. It just seems frustrating to me. And I do understand that there is the argument of, oh, well, when you run unstable and you get those drops, it is a higher quantity over time, right? Like, because you're not opening twice as many crystals over here, and I understand that. I just think that the drop table should represent the reward risk, because it is inherent that people running unstable will fail occasionally. That is just a natural part of having a higher difficulty content, and I think that the reward table should show that, even if it's very minor. Like, this should be 2,000 catalyst fragments instead of 1800. This should be 40,000 catalyst fragments instead of the equivalent 36,000 it is. But where I think they really get you, where the burn comes in, is in the shards. Because where it's netting neutral, there's no problem here because you're opening the same amount of crystals. So in the long run, this potentially has a much higher curve to it. And that's understandable. Like, this is skewed to the right. But these shards is where I really feel the burn. So in the 5-star shards, the numbers are exactly the same. Those are clean. It's these 4-star shards on this one where it gets a little funky because they sap some of the value and put it into the class awakening gem, and for that reason I'll probably be running the stable one unless someone has math to compel me otherwise. I just see the stable one as just having higher value. And so let me explain. If you normalize these values, 1,000 by 15%, 750 by 10%, and 500 by 5%, you have an access to 250 crystals here, once normalized. And once you normalize the crystal shards over here, one whole crystal, 2,000 at 5%, which comes out to 100. And when you normalize the 250 by 25%, over here, you have access to 162.5 crystals. And again, that is because of the awakening gem down here. I understand. but this is a large difference in just available access to crystals, right? And this is a 30% drop rate chance of getting crystals, as well as over here you can see it's still a 30% drop rate. So if you're opening equivalent amount of crystals, you will open up an equivalent amount of crystal shard drops, which does mean that on average you will receive more shards from the stable rift, and that just seems kind of counterintuitive. Like, the whole point of the unstable rift is that you're supposed to get better rewards, and you could make the argument, well, what if I get a class awakening gem? If you get a class awakening gem, then you have huge value there. But the thing about 4 stars is that they are readily accessible in the game. You can grind them in the arena. And we see with awakening gems, think of an awakening gem as a basic arena duplication. And the reason I say that is because when you get a featured awakening, it's like duping the character off a crystal. When you dupe the character off the crystal, you additionally get 24 tier 4 ISO. You also get 26 stones, essentially 26 stones dumped into that character. So it's a lot more valuable. But when you awaken them, they start at Sig 1. And you don't get any of that ISO. So in reality, in the long run, it's actually better to just get more 4-star shards and then wait to naturally dupe your characters, because more 4-star shards means more 4-star openings. More 4-star openings means in the long run, you're going to have more natural duplications. And a natural duplication will have the same effect as an awakening gem. And at a time, like if you're at a place where you really need these awakening gems because you're not accessing all those 4-star shards that are available to you on a monthly basis, this awakening gem has a lot more value. Or if you're specifically fishing for a specific class awakening gem so you can pop someone who you've not duped in a very long time, I understand that. And if this was generic, I wouldn't even be presenting this argument. If this was a generic awakening gem, that would always be worth, there's no RNG. But when you have a class specific, there is a chance that if you're fishing for like a tech awakening gem, that you're not going to get a tech one, and then this just sits there and it's dead in your pile, whereas these shards will always turn into more 4-stars, which could always be duplications, and at least will gift you ISO and 6 stones, or if your character is maxed, a max 6 stone. So with that being said, if these drop rates remain as they are, because of how accessible I believe 4 stars are in the game, I will be sticking to the stable rifts. I believe that I would rather have more shards than the chance at a class awakening gem that I honestly feel I don't need. I am happy to just deal with my roster wherever it is, duped or unduped, and just work my way towards natural duplication, as that will come with time. And then just kind of like a last comment, these 2 6 stones versus these 4 6 stones, this is half the drop rate. So again, this neutralizes out. I just think that these numbers should be a little bit higher. It doesn't make sense that they neutralize out so frequently. And on top of that, the 4-star shards are even less. Like, and just an easy fix to this would be to dump some of this drop rate percentage from the 4-star 250 up to the full crystal. Or like, why is this 250 when the lowest you go to on the stable is 500? I thought the whole point of the unstable was to have higher rewards. Just sticking an awakening gem in here and then lowering the crystal shards, this isn't a higher reward, because I would make the argument that in the long run, awakening gems are actually strictly worse than shards. So if you're like a veteran player who has no need to awaken your characters, go for the shards, right? Like, if you don't need to awaken your 4 stars, why would you go for the gem? Because that's really the only difference. On top of that, you're taking just a loss. Anyways, that's my frustration. But moving on into the tier 4 rift, I think this one's, as bad, if not worse, because when it comes to 5-star champions, class awakening gems actually hold value. And so it's much tougher for me to sell that point of like, don't go for the awakening gem, because in the long run 5-star shards are worth more and you want the increased pool of shards. Hold out on patience and like really drive patience. It's hard for me to say that, because then I would be a hypocrite. And I do think I'll go for the unstable just for that chance at the awakening gem, as frustrating as I feel this situation is. So let me run through the math really quick. Looking at the tier 2 alpha fragments, you have tier 2 alpha catalysts. This is double the drop rate. Again, this balances out. Tier 5 basic catalyst fragments, 2,250 at 10%. Well, let me tell you, half the drop rate, double the amount, that's 4,500. Neutralizes out. This is frustrating. 1,000 6-star shards and 500 6-star shards, both at 10%, gives you overall normalized value of 156 star shards. 256 star shards at 15% gives you a normalized value of 37.5, and 2000 at 5% gives you a normalized value of 100. So you have 137.5 6-star shards over here and 150. Now this is normalized, but that does mean on average for the same amount of openings you will get more 6-star shards from here. Next up is the 5-star shards. So 1000 at 15%, 2000 at 10%, 3000 at 5%, and what I would deem 10,000 at 10%, just because this is the value in shards. This normalizes out to 1500 5-star shards, whereas the 5000 at 5%, 500 at 30%, and I was generous here, and I valued the 5-star featured at 15,000. I know that's what it costs to buy in the shop, but I don't think anyone's buying 5-star featured these days, and if you are, let me recommend to you that that's generally speaking not a very good idea, especially if your roster is not large enough, but I put it at its whole value, and that brings you out to 1,150 shards over here normalized. So that means you're taking a 350 shard average loss by going for the unstable. And let me remind you that the unstable is supposed to be harder and have a higher chance of you failing. I just don't understand. And again, it comes with the caveat that you do have access to the Class Awakening gem. And for 5 stars, because of where the state of the game is, where 5 stars are not as accessible as 4 stars, like it takes much longer to grind these out. And unless you're a veteran player who's been playing for many years, you probably have a high need of Class Awakening gems, as even though it's not a natural duplication, you can dump 6 stones into that character, you can dupe a character that you might have not been able to use because you need to dupe them, and so this one's value goes up more. But let me tell you that the value there doesn't go up more because of static value. So in economics, there is the laws of supply and demand, and so when demand goes up and supply remains the same, then the cost of that item is increased. So this 5-star Class Awakening gem is still operating under the same theory as the 4-star Class Awakening gem, where over time this is worth less than shards. Shards are strictly worth more because you'll open more characters, will eventually dupe those characters, and those duplications will be worth more than an Awakening gem. Like in theory, if you had every 5-star character, it would just be better to have more shards, because then every crystal you would open in addition to would be better than an Awakening gem. Unfortunately, that's not the case for probably 95% of the player base, at least, excluding the hyper whales. And so this Class Awakening gem has value strictly because of demand. And I just feel like this is abusing the player base's logic like that. Like you're just abusing the supply and demand curve that way. And so that being said, I am going to try, like assuming I can clear these, right? Like this is all under the assumption you're in a position where you can clear these in the first place. I'm going to do my best to mentally prepare myself to only run the stable and to tell myself that I can patiently wait on my 5-star characters. I can patiently wait to dupe them naturally, because this, in the long run, is the better deal. And I just wanted to point that out. These numbers are misleading. Be careful. And when you see drop rates like this, don't take them for granted. Don't just look at what's in here and the amounts. Think about these drop rates. And if the drop rates aren't exactly the same, ask yourself, what information am I missing here by not looking at the math? And I know this is a little ranty. I think that this is a just completely unfair abuse of your player base. When we talk about transparency, like, and I know they've talked about being transparent, let me tell you, moving drop rate numbers around on the same, and then comparing it on a table like this is not transparent. Not everybody is going to do the math for your game. Not everybody is like me and is capable of acknowledging that there is math to be done here. I don't mean to spite that anybody, but there are many people who are just bad at math. I'm blessed that I'm good at math and I'm able to instinctively tell that this is shady. But this is shady. This is underhanded. This is absolutely maddening. Make your drop rates the same. And then if you want to have the drop rates be equivalent regardless, at least it's transparent. But there are going to be many people who will not watch this video because I don't have a huge following, but there are going to be many people who watch this video and don't know that these drop rates aren't any better. And that's just so sad. It just blows my mind. Okay, I apologize. I ended this on a rant. But long story short, if you have a long-term intention of playing this game right now, at least with where the game is at right now and what we have information-wise, go for the stable. And if you are a casual player or someone who only plays this game and only thinks you'll be playing for the short time, go ahead and go for the unstable. That's my evaluation. That's the information I wanted to present to you. I apologize for the rant. I did let my emotions kind of drive this video, but that's it. I'll talk to you later.